Welcome to Spiritually Fierce, the podcast. I am your host, Dr. Ricky Jane Adams, principal and founder of the Institute for Intuitive Intelligence and creator of the Spiritually Fierce movement. Spiritually Fierce is not just a phrase. It is a movement of awakening consciousness of which we are all a part, if we want to be. In each episode, we'll explore what it means to be spiritually fierce, how to become it, and why it is the revolution in consciousness that will save the world. Join me and my fierce guests for deep conversations on spirituality beyond the trinkets and superstitions of the new age that will support you to increase your power to serve. Hello everybody, and welcome back to season 2 of Spiritually Fierce, the podcast. Our theme all season is difficult spiritual conversations, and I have scoured the globe looking for men and women who I felt could really come into this space and have some deep and meaningful conversations about some hot button topics. And today I'm so grateful to be joined by Josephine Hardman, who is based in the US, and our guest today is highly esteemed. I'm just going to make her feel very awkward by reading her bio out, but it is an impressive bio. Josephine is a certified intuitive healer and Akashic records practitioner and teacher. She taught college for 10 years before leaving academia to do spiritual work full time. Her purpose is to help her clients and students awaken the healer within, the aspect of themselves that is powerfully intuitive, wise, connected, and at peace. Through a self-paced course and a comprehensive certification program, Josephine teaches others how to access the Akashic records for healing, transformation, and spiritual evolution. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for those generous words.
Well, there's so much in there that resonates for me, and such a sense of shared history, you know, walking away from an ivory tower university to pursue spirituality full time. You know, it's a big step to make, and I'm very excited to hear your journey. So let's start there. Where did your spiritual journey begin?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. So I had a really fortunate, and I would say unusual upbringing, in the sense that I grew up in a very spiritual home. My mom was a medium for a while. She was also a psychotherapist. She's still a healer.
Yeah.
And my dad was a lifelong meditator, yogi. So they both had explored all kinds of different areas of spirituality and transcendental meditation and mindfulness and yoga, the Akashic records. So when I was 17, my mom said, "Hey, there's this thing called the Akashic records. Want to learn about it?" And I said, "Sure." So that's when I was first introduced, for example, to a tool such as the Akashic records, that I then had with me just as a companion, that I've used all my life since then, just which has been so helpful to have that source of clarity and higher wisdom and guidance. So I was really fortunate in that way to be exposed to so many of those things. And then, of course, because I was also highly sensitive and I felt things so deeply, and at one point I said, "You know what, this is too much. I'm just going to retreat up into my head and just be an intellectual and live from the neck up, and no more spirituality, no more connecting to the heart and all these feelings," because it was too much. So that's when I went into, well, I was in college, and then I knew I'm just going to continue. So I got my master's, I got my PhD. I'm going to be a tenured professor. I'm going to do the whole thing. And so I was just living from the neck up for a long time. And then that was ultimately not a sustainable strategy, because just my heart started feeling a sense of grief about, well, maybe this is not really where I'm supposed to be, or this is not the place where I can be of most and highest service to others. Although I love teaching and I still teach, and that will always be a part of me. But now I do it in a different way. So I just had to follow my heart. And I also started realizing, well, there are a lot of parts of academia that are just not compatible with me at my core essential level who I am at that level. So yeah, I had to leave and then establish my spiritual business. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
I love that. And for those who are listening who know me, they will be chuckling because we share a very, very
Very
similar
similar.
path.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I'm laughing a little with joy because I
Yeah.
understand exactly what you're talking about. You know, as well as the retreating into the head, though, there was that absolute desire to pursue a mainstream life. There was also, you know, these
Yes.
competing needs in me where I wanted to be successful in the muggle world, to put it that
Yeah.
way, as
Hmm.
well as the yearning to be spiritually, you know, successful, if you know what I mean. But it wasn't
Yeah.
until I matured enough, and for me, it wasn't until my 30s really, that I felt ready to take up spirituality as my work.
Yes. Yeah. That makes so much sense though, that there were those competing desires, because I also had the desire, for stability
Yeah,
and like on all levels.
yeah,
So the oh, my retirement is already all planned out, and I have my health benefits. I mean, and those things are still desirable, of course,
yeah,
and it's really good to have them, and we can have them in a lot of different ways. I'm not saying we need to
yeah,
work in the corporate world or academia to have those things, but they are still very desirable. And for me, there was also the desire like for prestige
yeah,
and recognition, which is really just coming from my ego self and the desires of the ego, right? To have that external validation. And so that's one of the areas where I realized, oh, academia is incompatible with me because I am a perfectionist. I'm a recovering perfectionist. Sorry. Um, and I have that inner perfectionist part of me, and also the approval seeker and the people pleaser. And a lot of it was just feeding into that and fueling that and almost like rewarding me for my perfectionistic tendencies
yeah,
and ability to jump through hoops and get things done and be hyper productive. And I realized, well, if I stay on this hamster wheel, I'm gonna burn out.
yeah,
It's not gonna be good. And I did start getting a little bit sick towards the end of it.
yeah.
So yeah, I just had to leave. And that's been one of the biggest lessons, kind of to confront the inner perfectionist and then just have to release those tendencies, because in running a spiritual business, being an entrepreneur, I mean, it's all about making mistakes, taking risks, falling flat on your face, and then you have to get up again the next day and show up again and just keep at it. So it's a very different experience where you don't have the roadmap, and yeah, you just have to be willing to make those
Yeah.
mistakes.
I'd love to get your intake, oh, your take on it. For me, coming from an academic background, really helped me establish my service in a way that I believe has more rigor, more ethical foundations than a lot of the people that I see in the industry.
Yep.
And it actually felt like a great advantage. And I'm like you, I had to leave academia because of the toxicity and the, you know, to me it feels like a military organization, like, you know, the rank, you're just trying to work your way up through the ranks at all costs.
Yeah.
And I completely understand that need to leave. But when it came to starting the institute, I felt like I had this really great understanding of great pedagogy, understanding how to structure, you know,
Mhm.
programs, and to make learning something that is sophisticated and excellent. And I'm so grateful for that background because I think
Yeah.
it's lacking, unfortunately, in our unregulated industry. I'd love to know your experience then of stepping out of academia. How did you start your business, and did you bring or take ideas from the academic world?
Yeah, that's so great. It's like I could be saying the same thing you're saying.
Yes,
Because
it's actually hilarious. We have such a shared background. I love
are
it.
you me? What is happening? Um, yeah, I so agree that it has, in putting together, for example, my Akashic Record certification program, which I feel is a rigorous, comprehensive curriculum, right, in the records, but also because it helps people, it helps to prepare them to be certified practitioners
Yeah,
of the records. And I take that very seriously, that responsibility, and that people are going to be out there in the world doing this work with others,
yeah,
and then saying that I certified them. So I take that very seriously. Um, so in putting together that curriculum, absolutely, I drew on, my 9 years of teaching college, but also all the training I did in pedagogy and methodologies of teaching, and how do you get students to stay engaged throughout the whole program and to reach their outcomes, and to set attainable goals. All of those things are completely built in there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do feel like it gives it like a quality of rigor and excellence, but it
Yeah.
also just keeps it grounded,
Yes.
I think, which is so important too. And maybe we can talk about that too. Just so that we can avoid spiritual bypassing and
Yes.
help our students and clients avoid that tendency too, because it's just sometimes so tempting to use spirituality to escape
Yeah.
reality or to deny reality. And that's so in my program, one of the Akashic records principles that I teach is current lifetime relevance,
Yeah.
right? Because sometimes, specifically with the Akashic records, which we tend to think of them as a tool that gives us access to information about past lives, for example, right? And so it's so important that we always go into the records with the intention of whatever I find, whatever information comes through, I'm going to bring it down to earth and I'm going to use it. I'm going to make it actionable. I'm going to ask, how is that illuminating where I am today? How can it help me heal myself today and moving forward into the future? So that we're not just going up into the records or into any of these spiritual realms and then just sort of for its own sake, right? Or staying kind of caught up there, or looking at past life
Yeah.
trauma and then just feeling like victims and going into victimhood about it. We want to avoid that and just bring all of that
Yeah.
down to earth and see how can we use it
I love
now.
that. I love that. And
It's
that's
so important.
actually the meaning of spiritual fierceness is to me is it's the activation of our spirituality in the world in service to the greatest good, and that obviously starts with us. But yeah, if
Yeah,
it's all about bypassing or denying
yeah.
reality, then we've missed the point. And it's I use a term which is a little bit graphic, but past life porn, where we just get so caught up
Oh,
in that's what I
that's so
was then,
good.
and we
Yeah.
avoid like, well, how is all that knowledge helping you? Like, it's not if you don't apply it. So I love that. So let's keep going down this juicy path of unpacking the shadow side of spirituality, because
Yeah.
it really is so invaluable for us. And I know clearly, based on what you're sharing, this is a shared feeling that we understand the pitfalls, that just because it's spiritual doesn't mean that it's actually serving us. Lots of things
Mm-mm.
happen, just as with religion. Religion isn't necessarily good or bad, but it's whoever
Right.
it's in the hands of. But we often have this naive attitude with spirituality that if it's spiritual, it's good. And
Yeah.
it's not the case. And you've brought up a few terms that I know well, but then there are some that I don't. And I'd love to touch on the idea of ego and gatekeeping in the spiritual community. So, would you share with us what that means and your experience of coming to understand it?
Yes. So just as you're saying that sometimes we assume, oh, if something is spiritual, it's good, it's healing, and that is a fallacy. That is not always necessarily true. And I think there can also be this naive idea that, oh, because someone is a spiritual teacher or healer, or they call themselves that,
Yeah.
that they are a good person of integrity, that they walk the talk, that they've done the healing themselves. And that is not always necessarily true either, unfortunately, because anyone can call themselves a healer. I mean, anyone can call themselves
Yeah.
whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's why we have to be really discerning
Yeah.
and do our research, and really listen to our gut and heart about who we're choosing to
Yeah.
work with or listen to or take in guidance from. So important. Um, so when I talk about ego and gatekeeping in the spiritual community, so specifically, well, with ego, I think there can be this phenomenon of certain spiritual healers and teachers that want to have, for whatever reason, right? And maybe it's because they're wounded themselves, or maybe they haven't looked at some of their shadow aspects or their ego triggers and agendas. And so they just want to have power over others, or they want to feed into, and sometimes this is subconscious, right? Or done unconsciously, but feeding into other people's codependent
Yeah.
patterns, or telling people that they need to see a healer or teacher as some kind of intermediary, that they can't access divine guidance on their own, which really irks me.
Hmm.
Because it's like completely the opposite of what I'm about. But I have seen that unfortunately in the spiritual community. And I know some people that have, almost like trauma from those experiences, that
Yeah.
have been through that, where they did maybe give their power away and maybe they didn't realize that's what was happening until it was too late and then they had to get out of it. So yeah, it's really unfortunate and tragic when that happens. And then with gatekeeping, what I've seen too is sometimes this idea of, even with something like the Akashic records, right? And I know of some teachers, and I never name names because that's not, I want to be in my own integrity and I'm not here to call anybody out really. But I've seen some teachers who seem to believe that there is only one method, their method, or their way, or their prayer to access the records, and that other methods or ways of accessing this kind of information are not valid,
Yeah.
and that unless you train with them you're not really doing it. And that, I think, is not true at all. I think that we all have different methods of
Yeah.
accessing information. I think that the Akashic records are totally inclusive. It's not this like special thing behind some locked gate that we have to ask someone else for permission to access. So I'm all about trying to empower others to remember and reclaim their own power, their own inner knowing, and their own connection to these divine tools,
Yeah.
so that they can empower themselves, make their own choices, and just lead from that place of inner knowing, inner authority, right? That's
Yeah.
so important. Yeah. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Absolutely. That term inner authority is vital. And in my institute's work, we align that with the energy of the priestess, because particularly for women, we've been disabled in regards to our inner authority, of course, because we live in a patriarchy, and
Yeah.
thousands of years of, man-made religion has, positioned women as particularly women as lesser than. Although I love that you use the term inclusion, because it isn't just women who've suffered at the hands of patriarchy.
Right.
And I totally agree with you that this sort of exclusivity, or this fragility around there's only a certain number of places, it's this idea of, it's exactly what religion has tried to do. It's the idea that the priest is the only one who can take you to God.
Yes.
And I love what
Uh,
you're doing because it sits on such a privileged position to say only one person or only one place. Or so what if you don't fit that description? What if you are
yes.
not eligible because of your race, your gender, your skin color, your, these things are so steeped in the language of privilege, and create a hierarchy which is the opposite to what it sounds like you want to create, and certainly what I want to create.
Yes. Yeah. Even exclusion at the level of, well, I mean, this is like well, this is difficult conversations, right?
Yeah,
But
do
at the
it.
level of like, having certain financial resources,
Yes, yes.
which is why on my website, my freebie is basically just gives you a foundational understanding of what are the records and how can you start accessing them for yourself right now, this very day, and you don't have to pay me anything.
Yeah.
And some people, some coaches have said to me, well, why are you giving that away if that is part of the training, like that people pay you for? But it's because I don't want to keep that behind some kind of paywall
Yeah.
and make it look or seem as though this is exclusive
Yeah.
knowledge that only I have access to, that you need to pay me to access, because I just don't feel that's an integrity
Yeah.
with me. And of course, I can take you deeper. I can teach you other techniques. I can show you other ways of working with the records. I can mentor you And all of that is really valuable, and people get a lot out of it, and I get a lot out of it. But if you want to start accessing the Akashic records for yourself today as a tool of empowerment in your own life, then I'm going to give you that resource
Yeah.
that you need today so that you can do it, because it doesn't make any sense for me to say, oh, I'm going to keep this under lock and key.
Yeah.
It's just, it shouldn't be that way.
No, I love that. And I, yeah, again, totally in agreement with that ethos of, just giving people the keys to their own freedom. And then we know it's the energetic signature of whatever, am I meant to work with this person? That is destined well before we even come into these
Yes.
bodies.
Yes, because there's also this, I want to contribute to an energy of abundance and an energy of there are infinite tools for all of us to empower ourselves and grow and heal.
Yeah.
I don't want to contribute to some energy of scarcity and, well, if I share this, then nobody's going to work with me because I already gave it away. That's just not how I'm looking at it. So yeah, and I always ask myself, from what part of myself am I running my business in this moment? From what part of myself do I want to share this with others? And so, which helps me to stay in alignment with myself and just my higher goals for my business. So
there's so many paths I'd like to go down, because the entrepreneur as the spiritual practitioner is such an interesting nexus as well. But I'm also really keen for you to share a little with our audience of how you conceive of the Akashic records and how you do teach your students to access them, because that I think is fascinating.
Yeah, so I think of the records as, and this is all, here's where things get really interesting and also kind of tricky, because it's putting words to a really abstract concept that I think has to be felt really to be, it has to be experienced firsthand. But the Akashic records are essentially a vast storehouse of information, is one of the simplest ways we could put it, where all thoughts, words, deeds, actions are recorded, hence the name Akashic records. But the records are also made of this primary substance, akasha. That's what that Sanskrit word means. It means the fifth element, which basically is light. So the records are not just a passive repository of information, they're also ever evolving, ever breathing, ever changing. As we make different choices every day, so do our individual records change, or we can go in and clear out or heal past life, unresolved past life trauma, let's say, which then also clears the present and the future, so potential future timelines. So time is not linear inside of the records, everything is happening simultaneously. And essentially, they are accessible to us as a way to really, to me, the purpose is just to help humanity evolve and continue evolving, because there is almost like a principle of where things are constantly evolving and improving, I would say, even though sometimes it doesn't necessarily feel that way. But I think there is this essential call in the universe that is always pulling us towards wholeness and towards higher and higher levels of consciousness. And so the records are available to us as this tool of higher wisdom, divine guidance. And so that we can really, when we merge with the records, we're also merging with the highest aspects of ourselves, which means that we can better understand, why are we here? What is the purpose? How can we serve? How can we empower ourselves and others? How can we live in alignment? So all of the things we've been talking about, and making our spirituality really a practical, everyday thing. So that's how I perceive of the records. And then I teach my students how to access them. So through a portal prayer, which was handed down to me by my teachers, but it is not copyrighted. It's not, you can only use this prayer. I always encourage my students, if you need to tweak the language, because it's so important that the language resonates with each individual person as they're speaking it. And really, the prayer to me is more kind of an act of remembrance.
Yeah.
When we speak the prayer, just of remembering that actually we're not separate from the records. You
Mm.
know, there's this whole saying of, well, we are all God in a way, and we're also the records. The records are in us. We are the records. Really, there is no separation. It's just that we forget that it's all one whole. And so when we speak the prayer and we get really clear and we have a clear intention of connecting, it's just this act of remembrance of, oh, right, I'm actually not separate, even though I'm in a human body and it might feel that way right now.
Yeah.
And really, the bulk of the work is to clear ourselves out
Yeah.
of static, noise, ego, mind interference, so all of the distractions of modern life, all of the temptations to not all of the distractions and temptations that make it difficult to merge with the energy field of the Akashic records, because that's essentially what we're doing when we're connecting. And so we need to be able to match that higher frequency of the records, which means, you know, shedding ourselves of baggage, ego, all of these things that I'm talking about. And that's when we can match that frequency and then become one again with the records.
Yeah.
So a lot, well, really the first part of the training program is all about those kinds of experiences and issues, right, that come to the surface. So the resistance or fears or self-doubt, am I really going to be able to do this? Do I have the right to connect to the records? Which of course everyone has the divine birthright to do so, but it's really about clearing everything out and then opening the different intuitive channels
Yeah.
to receive. So how are people receiving information, and how can we fine tune all of that so that they can really receive accurate, relevant, useful information that they can apply in their current lifetime experiences.
Yeah. I love that. So many interconnections in just slightly different language, and I'm
Oh, yeah.
it makes me so happy because I do feel sometimes without judgment, but the sense that
Oh,
the
yeah.
doing things at the level of this quality and with the level of integrity, and the word I use is congruence, right? Like, am I congruent with what I'm aiming to connect to? If I'm
Yes.
not congruent with that high vibrational frequency, why would I think that I could go there, right? So I got to
Yes.
make some changes in my life. But I love
Yes.
that because it is the work. That is the hardest
It is.
part of it. It isn't about the end goal of like, I now have all that knowledge. It's like, did I bring myself into right action to be
Yes.
able to connect to that high vibrational frequency? So it makes me very happy.
Oh, yeah, and that's so important, you know, and that's sometimes one of the biggest questions that students ask, or that students will come in and say, "Oh, you know, I was having this really horrible day and I was feeling the sense of urgency or the sense of hopelessness about the future, and I was feeling really emotionally unstable. So I tried to connect to the records to get some relief, and I felt worse, right?
Yeah.
Or I felt more frustrated,
Yeah.
or I felt more just all wired up inside." And that's when I have to say to them, yeah, it typically does not, it's not a good idea to try to connect from a place of emotional instability, or if there is a lot of emotional charge, which is also why it's difficult to connect if we have preconceived expectations of what should happen or what has to happen, or if we're trying to make something happen as we connect to the records, or even in meditation, right? Because it's the same story when we're sitting down to meditate.
Yeah.
If we're trying to push it, force it, make something happen, that's when we get more frustrated and
Yeah.
we don't get the benefits that we're looking for. So it's so important to release all expectations, all agendas, and just fully surrender
Yeah.
into the present moment and trust that, well, first of all, yeah, that we need to shed any of the density that is keeping us separate from that higher frequency or making it hard to connect, but then just totally surrender into the present moment and just trust that whatever experience we have is unfolding at its highest potential in the perfect way, and it is exactly what we need in that one moment in time, whatever it is, even if it seems like nothing is happening. Sometimes that's what we need. So
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned that, trying to connect when you're in a heightened emotional state, when you're in chaos. It's the same spiritual bypassing strategy of like when we're really upset, we go and have a drink, or we eat something we
yes,
shouldn't, or we pick a
yeah,
fight with someone because we're trying to distract ourselves or numb ourselves rather than have that genuine connection. And, that you mentioned spiritual bypassing in that sense of denying or avoiding reality. And sometimes, and probably all the time, the first step is for me, acknowledge what I'm feeling, sit with the
mhm,
discomfort, and then
mhm.
change can occur. But we often try to use our spiritual tools to pretend none of this horrible feeling is present.
Yes. That's such a great way of putting it. Yes. It's like we're still trying at whatever cost to get rid of the discomfort as soon as possible, which I completely get because it hurts, right?
Yeah.
And because we're human and we don't want to suffer. But it's like instead of having the drink, I'm reaching for the tarot deck or
Yeah.
the Akashic records or the crystals just to try
Yeah.
to numb myself, which is, and again, I get it because we don't want to be in that state of suffering, right? So we're going to reach for something. But ultimately, if we're doing it that way, then we're still giving our power away and we're not really being present with whatever is arising in the moment,
Yeah.
which just keeps us disconnected and is going to create more discomfort in the long term.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and then we create a culture of what I call spiritual retail therapy, where it's about what can I buy? If I buy something that's spiritual, then it's better than buying something that I
right,
like, like clothes or whatever.
right. That's so good. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And it is all, yeah, just more of spiritualizing the ego. And I think what I love about what you're sharing is that it is the antidote, excuse me, to that. And it is that return, as is very aligned with my work, that the healer is within.
Mhm.
And yes, we can often need someone to guide us to find that healer within, but ultimately, no healing occurs externally. And that's so much of what you teach.
Yes, that's the other thing. Nobody can come in on that white horse,
Yeah.
right, to fix us, heal us, make everything better. That's just not something that can come from the outside.
Yeah.
And even then, even when we're healing ourselves, typically there is no magic bullet or quick fix, right? It's just a lifelong process
Yeah.
of staying engaged with what is arising in the moment and then being willing to sit with it and
Yeah.
taking accountability for ourselves and responsibility of what we're creating and how is that affecting those around us.
Yeah.
So yeah, just so many different ways that we need to step up and take ownership, right? And notice when we have that temptation to give our power away, because I think life sometimes it seems a lot easier if someone else is just telling us how to do it or what to do or
Yeah.
what the next step is.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of courage to say, okay, I'm going to go within, I'm going to be my own authority. And from now on, I am creating my life, I am making my choices, and I am living with the consequences
Yeah.
of those
Yeah.
choices. But I think that's really what it means to be, a spiritually awake being.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's self-reliance, and it's hard and it sucks sometimes, and it's, yeah,
Yeah,
completely something we try to avoid, but ultimately it is freedom and it is worth the effort, right? And that
it is.
sweat for God, that's the idea. I want to ask you some slightly more personal questions so we can get to
Okay.
know you.
Yep,
What
yep.
is something that people misunderstand about you?
Ooh, wow. That's a big one.
Yeah.
um, I mean, I'm thinking more in the past, but I just because I think growing up highly sensitive, highly intuitive, and I am an extreme introvert. Like if introversion and extroversion are on a spectrum, I am like way on the hermit side
Yeah.
of it. Um, and I think that has sometimes especially more like in groups or crowds where I will tend to hang back more and just listen and observe because I'm trying not to get overstimulated or overwhelmed. So there can be like a misunderstanding of, oh, there is like an aloofness or a coldness or,
Yeah.
those kinds of things, which sometimes we grow up with. If we identify with some of these things, like being introverts.
Yeah.
But really, I feel, and this is, I hope is not a like coming from a narcissistic place, but I feel I can be pretty charismatic when I'm speaking. I mean, I have a
Yeah,
podcast,
yeah.
and I have a lot to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just one way that it like a misunderstanding of me that has followed me my whole life, I
Yeah.
would say.
I love that. But you can see the energy of the mystic in there, right? Like that she probably needs to be in a monastery on a mountaintop somewhere.
Oh, yes. I mean, probably so many lifetimes where I actually did that.
Yeah.
So yes. I'm still learning how to navigate the human external world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What are you reading right now?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay. I recently got this book. What is it called? I can't remember the title right now, but it is all about detachment.
Yeah.
So it's like 365 days or lessons in detachment. Um, I wish I could remember the author right now. I have it up on my desk. But so every day it's like, so today, what does it mean to detach, let's say, from other people's
Yeah.
issues
Yeah.
and not take them on and not try to fix everybody? What would that look like? How would the day unfold if I did that today? Or what would it feel like to detach from some internal conflict
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is happening and just to kind of leave that to the side? How will the day unfold?
Yeah.
So it's more of an active book,
Yeah.
if you will. But yeah, it has been really helpful because I am working on detachment
Yeah.
right
Well, you
now.
can absolutely send me a note with the name and we can share
Okay,
that in the
yes,
show notes.
yes, let's do that because it's been a really, really helpful book. Yeah, I
Yeah.
will do that.
Especially as you mentioned, with the people pleaser archetype, which so
Oh,
many of us have in this, because, we are very sensitive to other people's needs, that we
yeah.
can overcompensate. We can end up being too invested unintentionally, for
Yes.
sure. So, if today was your last day on Earth, what would
Yeah.
you want us to know?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I think just tying into everything we have been talking about today, because I sometimes think of just in loose terms, well, what is my legacy or what am I really leaving behind? Um, and ultimately, it is the most important thing for me that I want people to know is that we all really do have this divine birthright to be our own sovereign beings,
Yeah.
that we don't have to give our power away to culture or society or religion or our families of origin or any programming or conditioning, and that there is always this uncorrupted, essential, truthful self underneath that conditioning that can be brought back up into the light, and that we can live more aligned, vibrant, truthful, healthier lives from that place. And that self is never lost,
Yeah.
right? So that is something that can always be reclaimed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Oh, thank you. That is just perfect. And I just love that image so much of that shining sovereign being within us, just waiting
Yeah.
for us to find her beneath all the wreckage of everything we've
Yeah.
inherited. And yeah,
That's
that's
it.
that's the eternal truth. And yeah,
Yes.
and she is so present and radiant with you. And I'm so grateful that I found you in my searching across
Yeah.
the
Me
internet. I
too.
think it was, yeah, well met, and really just excited to spend more time with you and learn more about you, and so grateful for everything you've shared with our audience today. I think they're going to love this interview.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Josephine. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, this was beautiful.
I agree.